and gentlemen, gender nonconforming and trans deities, welcome to the Hoodoisie! We are Chicago's bi-weekly underground live and live stream news show that gives Black optic and radical perspectives on culture and politics. I'm your host, Ricardo Gamboa, or Ricardo Gamboa, or, as I am known across the country, the radical Selena. No one calls me that. Wow. A lot has happened since the last 2 weeks when we were all together. Like, Happy Halloween! 'Tis the season for racially offensive merriment, as Megyn Kelly demonstrated on her NBC talk show earlier this week, Megyn Kelly Today, where she defended blackface during a segment. She asked the panel on her show, "But what is racist? You truly do get in trouble if you are a white person who puts on blackface at Halloween." Yes, Megyn, you fucking do. The backlash was swift and sudden, and Kelly was fired from NBC within a couple of days. But, you know, I'm into transformative justice, and I don't think that's how it should have been handled. I mean, now that I think about it, we should have let Megyn Kelly dress up as, I don't know, like Adora Milaje or Zoe Saldana playing Nina Simone, or any costume that requires her to do blackface, and then watch her get unjustly incarcerated. Unfortunately, that's not what happened to Megyn Kelly. Instead, she received a $69 million severance. In case you're wondering, or in case you're NBC, that is enough money to hire over 230 black journalists at $60K a year for 5 years. Speaking of trick-or-treating, bombs were sent to the homes of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, George Soros, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Robert De Niro, all high-profile critics of Trump. I'm kind of salty I didn't get one. The nation was arrested in suspense all week as the Secret Service defended these neoliberal Democratic heroes and De Niro. By the week's end, the perpetrator was apprehended and identified as 56-year-old Cesar Sayok. He might be Latino, I'm praying not. George Zimmerman came out of Florida. The Latinos in Florida are on some fucked up shit. He is a self-proclaimed white supremacist living out of his van covered in Trump stickers. The Aventura, Florida resident was reportedly also a DJ, pizza delivery man, and bodybuilder, just like you would expect someone living in a place called Aventura, Florida to be. So what else? Oh, migrant caravan, that was in the news. I think we should stop calling it a migrant caravan. It makes it sound like a fucking parade. They're not running the Chicago Marathon to raise money. They are refugees from U.S. foreign policy in Central America. Let's not clap for that, but you know what I mean. Let's acknowledge it. Yeah, I mean, and that coverage is everywhere, right? It's like in the middle of the night, I wake up and look at my television and they're on. It's in the morning. You know what I mean? They can't stop it. It's like the Olympics. It's literally an oppression Olympics. You win some, you lose some. What's up? Well, you're joining. All right, so this week, don't even know what the topic is. Very ambitious, very eager.
Damn.
This week, we learned that Amazon is making billions of dollars off America's deportation industrial complex. Amazon Web Services is providing the backbone for ICE's immigrant tracking database, which federal officials say is, quote, mission critical, end quote, to their deportation regime. We also learned that Amazon has developed a new tool which can recognize and track hundreds of faces at a time through video surveillance. So, how do we combat this at a local level when Amazon controls roughly a third of the internet?
I just got a package from Amazon today. And I felt really guilty about it after I read all the articles. And I think I have generally in my lifetime tried not to engage in that kind of commerce because I think it's environmentally irresponsible. But I'm curious for my fellow panelists, for the audience, to what extent do we think that individual divestment from Amazon is impactful?
I think it's going to impact us a lot soon, especially if Chicago gets the new Amazon facility, right? So part of that deal is that the city and the mayor put forward about $700 million in tax breaks, and this is revenue that actually belongs in neighborhoods and schools. And if that passes, that money is going to be used to subsidize Amazon. It's going to impact in terms of how much money our schools get, whether we continue having mental health services, what happens in our neighborhoods. And so one thing that all of us could do very concretely is when that decision comes down, our ask to go to City Hall, our ask to take over the streets, our ask to hold people that are going to vote for that deal accountable, and that's one thing that we could do.
Okay, but if my ass is getting banged by my boyfriend, can I send another part of my body? Like my hands or my mouth?
I would rather
you know what
see your boyfriend's ass out there too.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can follow up with that, you know. It just really hurt my virginal ears a while ago. Yeah, I think that we need to think about Amazon as rehearsing, this as a kind of rehearsal of the surveillance state that is very much in keeping with the neo-fascist movement in which we're living. I think that rather than talking about how can we adjust consumption, I think we need to talk about what kind of movements can we get involved with, you know, with our asses, with Ricky's ass, anybody's ass.
Everybody's ass.
To make change.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about how, when it comes to surveillance, the tech folks kind of get it both ways, right? So we hear whether it's ICE or CPD that they're relying on these new technologies, and you know, even with 40% of the city budget going to the cops buy their own uniforms, officers are falling. A lot of that money is going to new technology and surveillance programs. That's where a huge bulk of it goes. So they get it on that end. And then with the reformists, with liberal reforms to the prison system, the answer is we get people out of jails and prisons and we survey them. So we have new technologies investment that way. So the tech side of it, they get folks both ways. So I think, you know, we know who's on the other side, but it's really important when, you know, folks are making reformist arguments for what to do, that we not settle for surveillance as a, you know, baby step towards abolition, because the same folks are going to profit off that.
Speaking of individualists, as you all know, my favorite musical artist is Kanye West. But this week, West made headlines in Chicago for a different reason. He gave over $73,000 to Amara Enya's campaign, helping her pay off the debt she owed to the State Board of Elections. So I work for Amara's campaign, and I know you've all heard me talk shit about Kanye on the show. So I think it's important for us to kind of acknowledge that in this space, and make space for, you know, for critique and conversation. So
Yeah, Ricky, I have questions.
Yeah, we all have questions.
so I guess I'm wondering, how are we all feeling about Kanye's involvement in Chicago politics, and particularly in this, what's framed and identified as one of the most progressive campaigns in Chicago right now?
So
Calm it down.
Damn.
You're fucking running off here.
So, before we talk about Kanye, I have questions about Chance, because Chance also is supporting the campaign, and I know that the affiliation of Chance and Kanye is definitely going to give Amara a boost in terms of publicity. I am curious about why there's not the same questions about Chance. I mean,
Can you give some background on Chance? What's the story?
Why would
I
there
don't
be
know the
questions?
story.
Yeah.
well, I am inviting someone to correct me or to offer some other information, but like his proximity to Rahm Emanuel, did his father not participate in the Laquan McDonald cover-up? Like, are there not like also questions about, I don't know. So like Chance does these things like donate $1 million to CPS or to mental health facilities in Chicago, while like also being in very close proximity to folks who are closing down schools and mental health facilities. And I'm just wondering like why there's not like a similar scrutiny there.
Yeah, because you didn't text that to me, Kristiana. You didn't tweet at me about that. I mean, I
Well,
feel so betrayed right now.
just for full, a little bit of context, he doesn't work for Rahm. His dad doesn't work for Rahm anymore. It's not that there isn't an affiliation, and he has been publicly critical. But where that money, how that works, that I don't know.
And I think that part of what I never question is Amara's ethics, values, and insistence on kind of like creating a more compassionate, equitable, and just city. And so with that, there was conversations within the campaign about how, like, about Kanye's involvement. And one of the things that was very clear is that despite whatever problematic, hateful antics, he's been doing it with his support for Trump, that he was down with a vision for creating a Chicago that is more equitable for Black and brown people. And, I think the contradictions there are with him to figure out. His cognitive dissonance, him wearing a MAGA hat and a Colin Kaepernick jersey.
And so what I've been thinking about is the old Chris Rock bit about like in his gated community in New Jersey, it's like him, like Oprah owns a house, and then there's just a random ass dentist. And it's like the only two black people in the neighborhood are him and Oprah, and then there's just a dentist. And so you think about who has access to the funds to support a candidate like that, and like those dentists are giving plenty of money to their candidates.
I am confused as to why anybody would pose a question or be particularly critical of Amara for getting money from any of these people, because I think when you enter politics, this is the nature of politics, right? That I mean, when she gets a donation from me or from, I haven't given any money. I do vote. I vote. We can have a conversation about why that is. But I actually think that she doesn't vet me when I'm giving her money, or you or anybody
Well, I
else.
hope she doesn't vet me.
She didn't even vet you when she hired you.
But the thing is that political campaigns, Kanye with a little mental health problem and chance, like those people to me are like, I don't see why it's a conversation, because when you enter into the system, this is how the system functions. So it's not like, oh, suddenly how could she? What a betrayal of radical progressive platform to accept money from a rapper. Like what? Come okay. What are we even talking about? Like,
To give us the breakdown on dying a good death, we've got Emmy Colon. Emerita Colon is a lifelong Chicagoan activist, scholar, and good death advocate. As a certified death midwife, Emerita offers emotional, spiritual, and practical support to the dying and their communities. She is committed to challenging the status quo, facilitating the expansion of death care resources, and decolonizing the good death movement. Let's give it up for Emerita Colon. Girl, this just took a dark-ass turn.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, right? Can you tell us, what does a death midwife actually do?
So there are a couple of things we can do. It could be as simple as just breaking down the legal aspects of death and dying to somebody in a very concrete way. It could even be helping.
There's legal aspects?
So many. In the state of Illinois, technically, you could have a home funeral, but you can't be the one to bring the dead body there. So if you die at home and it's in your will, then you're allowed to still have your body be there, but if you want like a natural burial or to be cremated, somebody's got to pick that body up. But in like Wisconsin, you could throw your grandpa in the back of your truck, NBD. So
I have an idea for my funeral that I never told anyone, but I want to. I thought about how I would just want to be laid down, and there'd be a giant corn El Milagro tortilla, and then someone to throw me in it, and then people get to throw cilantro and cebolla on me as they pass, and then roll me out and ship me out in Lake Michigan and light me on fire.
Woo! Is that legal in Wisconsin?
Is that legal?
mostly legal here, very legal in Wisconsin.
Okay, so keep telling us, what death midwives?
Okay, so that's one aspect of it. So the emotional part is being there for the family, being there for the dying person. And sometimes I'm there as the bouncer, because if it's in the home, then the dying person could be like, I don't want this one person to show up. I had an affair with them. They can't be here. So, it all depends.
Damn, I need to do some scandalous shit, because my funeral would be boring.
Doesn't have to. It's all in the planning. It could be as extra as you want it to be.
I
There
wanna
was
know who.
somebody who said, in this part of my basement, in this box that's locked with this key, are letters from my mistress. Please burn them and have pictures.
One of the things that we talked about in your bio and is the good death movement. What does that mean?
Yeah, the Good Death Movement is essentially whatever you want to have happen to you, you take ownership of that. And having a relationship with death and dying is an ongoing process, with any relationship. People aren't always jazzed about their kids. You gotta keep working on that. With anything in life, you gotta keep at it. So, checking in with yourself, figuring out what scares me about it, what do I even want, would I want to be kept on life support? Like, that's an ongoing thing. So like, that's one aspect of it, you know, the fact that the earth is dying and the way that we've been, you know, trained a lot. Like, after the Civil War is when embalming became like the new conventional way to die. So, you know, we're pumping the earth with new carcinogens, we're using up all these resources, and whenever you do a conventional cremation, all of these carbon dioxide like shoots up through the air.
Like you said, like one of your objectives is to decolonize the good death movement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I really value all the work that has been done by everyone involved with the order itself. But there's definitely
Girl, this sounds like Harry Potter.
Right, exactly.
The order of the good death movement right now.
Right.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, she looks like a Wednesday Addams figure, like Caitlin Doty is the mortician behind the Order of the Good Death. But she had her Ask a Mortician YouTube show, and you know, she's very like tongue-in-cheek, like funny about a lot of these things in order to engage people with it. And that's really awesome because the conversation, you know, took off from there. But the downside to that is like, you, a white woman, are telling the stories that I should be able to tell about how to die, you know, with a home funeral in Puerto Rico. Like, you should be working in concert with me so I could tell my story and use that platform, because if all of these million people are listening to you, then call upon the community in order to engage us, because we're the ones that are being exploited by the funeral industry.
Why do you think our society is like so prudish about death, and we don't, you know, I mean, like, and I'm like Mexican, like we have Coco, but that shit's fucking cute, right? Like, and you know what I mean? We have Day of the Dead, I still ain't trying to talk about fucking death, right? Like, so why, like, are we so, you know what I mean? Like, where do you think that stems from?
I think a lot of it comes from being told that it's taboo and like it being more hands off. Like, the minute you hand off something to somebody else, it no longer becomes your problem. Just like if you stop like cleaning your own toilet or doing things on your own, then it suddenly becomes gross because you don't really understand what you're getting yourself into. So I think it starts with your community, it starts with like loved ones, like that honest conversation about why, like a lot of why questions. Like, I am afraid. Well, why is that? Because I'm afraid I'm gonna get shot after the show. Well, why is that? Like, do you feel like you're, like, I'm afraid of dying prematurely because my work will finish? It's like, okay, well, maybe that should empower your future work, because if you get out there and you still do what you're doing, it'll empower the people to keep doing that work too, because when I die, if I were to die tomorrow, then I hope that somebody who hears this will want to pick up the mantle and keep talking about this. Because it can't just be me doing the important work, it has to be other people.
Yeah, that reminds me, when you were talking, I had a new idea for a funeral, because
Yes.
you said that it'd be humorous, like, or using humor.
Yes.
So I was thinking, what I want my funeral to be is I want me to be like, kind of like standing up, like not in a coffin, because that's like killing trees, but just like propping me up somehow. And then like there'd be people there, and it'd be like a roast. But like I can't get offended by the jokes, so they could literally say anything that they want.
Yeah, that's all the rage in Puerto Rico.
Right, and then what happens is at the end of it, they pass around a bat, because one, my dad's family loved baseball, but I was like bad at it, right? Like, so it's like, but I'm not embalmed, I'm stuffed with candy, and then they could beat me like a piñata, and then like, and people that I've hurt and that they feel hurt by me can like do it the most, and then like it'll all just like,
Yes.
and it's also symbolic because I'm a faggot and it's filled with sweet stuff. So like, what do you think?
Is that legal in Wisconsin?
Jadele McPherson is a performance artist, vocalist, playwright, activist, and scholar from New York City. She creates performance pieces that reflect on violence and the black body. She is a lead artist of Lukumi Arts, an experimental theater collective which infuses traditional Afro-Cuban tradition and culture into interdisciplinary works. She is also our musical performance tonight, and I admire her work so fucking much. Please give it up for Jadele! We first met in 2011 in New York when I was facilitating a workshop for your cohort at the Hemispheric Institute of Performance and Politics, Emerge NYC. And one of the things that, you know, when I was even thinking about this show, is that I started to realize how much you use the words death and dying and how much they appear in your social media commentary, whether it's about being a black artist in this time of black death,
or engaging activism that's always haunted by death. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this show. You know, can you just briefly let us know like the span of your art, activism, and scholarship and how you got to that work?
You speed up a little bit to come backwards or to understand the moment. And so in this moment right now, I'm really understanding that my father connected us. And my father, you know, was born in Mississippi and came here at the age of 5 to the west side of Chicago. And, you know, in the time of 2011 to 2013, I buried both my father and my grandmother. And so actually when I was doing Emerge, you know, I was coming late. I was, you know, 45 minutes late. I was kind of outside of my body. You know what I mean? I was kind of, I had a very close relationship with my father. He influenced a lot of, I think, my ability to be able to do the work like this. Because often too, we talk in, whether it's social media, the way people see us, I'm becoming more cognizant of it, but I think when we talk about death and dying, we talk about what you were talking about with embodiment and what do we embody and what are our legacies. These things are handed to us, you know what I mean? And they're not handed to everybody. And so I think a lot of my journey has been about, as you say, not only decolonizing a body, but to open the portals of what has been given to me, what has been shown to me, and allowing myself to be guided.
Your art is also informed by like that non-Western spiritual practice. And so like, how does that shape your work?
Chicago is not considered a center of the history of Lukumi, Palo, Espiritismo. You know, Miami is considered, or people think of New York. But again, when we talk about mapping these legacies and mapping who we are, we know that we exist in corners that people don't expect to find us. And so my calling, you know, it came here. And it was real black and real us. You know, it was basically like, we ain't got nobody to sing. She sang good. Sing the song, baby. And I'm like, okay, you know, and that kind of literally grew with like literally putting one foot in front of the other, and people and elders in the community here, a lot of Black Cubans were completely invisible. If you say there's an Afro-Cuban community in Chicago, people, you know, looked at me like I fell from another planet. But this idea, you know what I mean, that there's no Afro-Latinos in Chicago outside of the Puerto Rican community is just bullshit, and we really need to fix this fucking, you know, invisibility issue that we have. We talk about, you know, death at the hands of the state. We don't necessarily jump to our practices. We don't jump to curanderismo. We don't jump, you know what I'm saying? We're not making that leap, and that's a problem because that's intentional. When you were talking earlier, I got the vision of, y'all know the story of Hatwe? You know, Hatwe was born in Santo Domingo, he makes it to Cuba. And, you know, the Spaniards are there doing their thing, you know, doing their dirt, and they about to burn him to the stake, and the priest, you know, steps up, and the priest is like, one last time, you know, would you like to be saved? You know, would you like us to save your soul? And he was like, where y'all gonna be? Y'all gonna be in heaven? Take my ass right to hell. You know what I'm saying? And that's like, you know what I'm saying? That's the kind of ideologies that we need to understand and the legacies that we need to study to open up the possibility, because what happens is then there's a lot of despair. And how we use this in our art is, again, part of a legacy, and it's not appropriation. There is commodification of that going on, but it's necessary because we don't know. We're not taught it. And then we're taught to fear it. And so in our decolonization work, again, we think, okay, we're doing this today. We had a panel, you know, we don't have to put out a little liquor, or we don't have to put out, you know, a little something for the spirits, but why not?
I mean, this is for you, but I'll pour one for
You
them,
better.
too. All right, go ahead.
Because then I don't want them turning out no more stuff.
And so in Spanish, like there's a saying like that translates to like, tell me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are. And like in this like saying, like in this like show about death, I'm interested in like who, you know, who do you walk with? Who are your elders and like the ancestors, like, and how do they guide your work?
Yeah, I said it jokingly, but I think it's like often when we think of the past and we think of Blackness, we always talk about slaves. We don't talk about the enslaved, or we don't talk about the Maroons. We don't talk about those lineages of us who were never enslaved, and how enslaved people and free people work together. You know, one particular ghost, you know, why I'm in graduate school is because of this ghost that I just can't shake, you know, who was Jose Antonio Aponte. And I've become obsessed with him in a way because, you know, he was this free brother, you know what I mean, living in the late 1700s. A person like Aponte, whose head was cut off and hands were cut off, as soon as I read that, I felt that connection, right, of spirit. Like, this is something that I have to talk about and work on. And it's been 3 years, and I'm getting a PhD. They don't know, but, you know, it's because of spirit, you know. And he was accused of, you know, conspiracy to, you know, overthrow the Spanish crown. And the only evidence that they had was this book, Un Libro de Pinturas. And if you go back and you read, a lot of scholars have started to do the archival work of, you know, going back and uncovering, you know, why it is that nobody could find this book. You know, what we have are the transcriptions of the interviews or the interrogations of, you know, the highest ranking Spanish officer on the island, Nere, interviewing Aponte, right? And Aponte is giving these real black responses. They're like, you know, on page 3, is it true that that is a map of the underground tunnels of Havana? And Aponte is like, what do you mean? You know, and so this is like subversive, right? It's artist, it's artistic, and it's like what struck me about Aponte was, again, he was a brother who was free, he was a military general, he came from a line of generals, he went to the Bahamas, he went to Haiti. He was doing things that, again, we don't associate with 1794 or 1798. And by the time he gets to 1812, he's such a leader and he's so revered in his community, which is the community of Jesus Maria, a very black neighborhood of La Habana. And I just, in my play, La Sirene, you know, I just kept visualizing. I was like, okay, we can talk about the archive, we can talk about the story, we can talk about all this, but what I want to focus on is when they chopped off his head and they chopped off his hands and those of his other accused conspirators, because they were that threatening to the possibility of not only a free Cuba, but a Cuba without slavery. If I walk out of my house and the person that I love, my community activist leader, and I see their head and I see their hands, what does that do to the psyche? What does that do to embodiment? What does that do to my possibility and my understanding of black freedom? How does it affect my silences? How does it affect the way I speak? How does it affect the way that I see death, right? And this is a collective history. We can talk about the politics another day. We can talk about the ways that we don't see each other, the ways that we compete for resources, the ways that we hold space, or the ways that we want to move more effectively together. But at some point, if we're talking about liberation, if we're talking about really seeing 250 years into the future, we're not just saying black and brown unity, we're saying that African indigenous people in the Americas are us, and we have a history and we have a legacy that we refuse to give up.
Yeah. Coinciding with Halloween and Dia de los Muertos, tonight's show explored the politics of death and dying. The irony of holidays like Halloween and Dia de los Muertos that are meant to remind us of our impermanence, the thin veil between life and death, and that our dead are amongst us, is that many of us, because of who we are, black and brown, women and femmes, queers or the undocumented, are haunted by the possibility of death every day. Particularly in this political moment when the state and power has blatantly marked us as disposable. We're here at Citlalin Gallery in Pilsen, a Mexican-American and immigrant neighborhood. Anyone that grew up here likely has stories of family or friends lost to factors like gang violence or police brutality. But right now, all across Chicago, neighborhoods like Pilsen are haunted by their own death as gentrification marks our communities for death and a heavenly neoliberal afterlife of pearly gates or art galleries, craft breweries, condos, and maybe an Obama center. Gentrification wants to leave nothing of us but a spectral trace of our presence and struggles. Under these conditions, it is important we remember our dead and that we fight for our dead. The guilty verdict of Jason Van Dyke for the murder of Laquan McDonald shows us what's possible when individuals insist on honoring our dead. I want everyone in this room to conjure in your mind one person dead because of injustice that you will be fighting for to make this a better world. For me, tonight, it is Natasha Howlett and Perry Burrell. Both were former students of mine during a brief stint as an English teacher at a charter high school where I was eventually fired, if you could believe it, for refusing to practice creative censorship. Natasha was a mother of 2 and shot at a bus stop 10 years ago. Perry was shot at a stop sign in West Garfield Park 3 years and 2 days from today on October 25th, 2015. He was visiting from Madison where he had moved and was coming back for the 10-year memorial of the shooting of his brother, Kayvon. Perry was a brilliant comedian, rapper, and poet. He was also hyperactive as fuck, and I started letting him perform in our class at the beginning of the day to release his hyperactivity. I remember the first poem he ever performed by heart. If you ain't ever lost nobody, you don't know how it feels. Nightmares in the middle of the night got me ready to kill. Mama stressed out, doctor trying to give her a pill. If you ain't ever lost a brother, you don't know how it feels. In this city, death is all around us. I remember when Perry died, a friend of mine consoled me by saying he's with the ancestors now. Black and brown woke culture has included decolonization of religion so that it's commonplace to hear the phrase, pray to your ancestors. To me, so often this is used to figure our ancestors like fairy godmothers waiting to grant our wishes, and isn't much different from the way Western Christianity encourages prayer to God when we want something. But these days, I believe, given the injustice and oppression that sends so many of us to the other side, that our ancestors are not supposed to be there for us. We are here right now for them. To remember and fight for them to bring to life the world they were denied, because if radical change requires we center the most marginalized, I want to say that no one is more marginalized than the dead. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to the Hoodoisie. I appreciate everyone being here, and without further ado, let's give it up for Jadele McPherson.
A veces quisiera llorar, caballero, y las lágrimas se me salen, yo no sé por qué. Belen, men, belen, men, belen, men, men. Quizás es porque tengo sentimiento. Cuando del África llegué, yo traje mis caracoles. Cuando del África me quitaron de mi hijo para que fuera esclavo. Me tiraron en el monte como si fuera una feria, y el amor se enriqueciera. Ay, 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 mi Dios, qué mundo más traidor. El amor no quiere que yo toque tambor. Guaguancó, colombiana, que yo toque mi tambor. El amor no quiere que yo toque mi tambor. Sentimiento que me lleva a la loma, güey. El amor no quiere que yo toque mi tambor. Sentimiento que me lleva, güey. El amor no quiere que yo toque mi tambor. que yo toque mi la yeodo, que yo toque agua, mi tambor, que yo toque mi que yo toque mi tambor.